Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and we are continuing our Revisiting Best Picture series with Women Talking. This is what I'm really excited to talk about because I saw this at a film festival. You saw this at a film festival. We have a Sarah Polley t-shirt on screen, and
We do.
It finally came out and opened near me. I was able to rewatch it. So, as always, though, we do have a guest as we're revisiting these Best Picture nominees. So, Sierra, what's your relation with Sarah Polley?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've always loved Sarah Polley. My aunt grew up watching her Anne with Green Gables show. So my
Nice.
aunt was telling me after I had mentioned that I knew Sheila, who's in Woman Talking, and obviously directed by Sarah Polley. She was saying that she was actually subscribed to a magazine that was a Sarah Polley fan club. So she had all these magazines of the Road to Avonlea
That's so
fan
funny.
club kind of stuff. So she was like, that's hilarious. She used to be so obsessed with her. And I've always thought that she was brilliant, and this is definitely no different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got to say that this is probably, despite the fact that, I would still say Everything Ever All at Once is one of my favorite movies of all time. There is no movie at the Oscars that I stan harder than Women Talking. I've been talking about this movie for a year and a half, ever since I first heard about it. I was making my student thesis film, and I had cast Sheila McCarthy in the film, who was also in Women Talking. And I remember I had a meeting with her in July. And I sat down with her and I was like, what have you been up to? And she's like, I just wrapped on this movie called Women Talking. And this is the cast. It stars Jessie Buckley and Frances McDormand and Claire Foy. And, she told me all about it. And so I've been biased towards this movie for so long because I had that personal connection. I got to work with Sheila, we both got to work with Sheila. You were also in the movie. And she's just such a miraculous, kind, giving person. And I'm a huge Sarah Polley fan. I love all of her movies. Stories We Tell is one of my favorite documentaries ever. And she's Canadian. This film is so Canadian that it just... There's so many reasons for me to be biased against it. I got to interview Sarah Polley as well. That's another reason for me to be biased about this. She's the nicest person ever. She's so kind. She's so, oh my God. I have so many reasons to be biased. But the thing that amazes me with this movie is that beyond all of that, even if I wasn't totally biased towards this movie, I would still love it. It is still one of the best movies of the year. It is absolutely fantastic. I know you are also biased, but what did you think about Women Talking?
Oh my gosh, I just loved it. I loved everything about it, and I, on a different note, got to interview Sheila about it after a screening of both our short film as well as her
And I'd say you guys are friends at this point. I guess so.
She's so cool.
She's so
cool. She
so cool.
floats. She doesn't even walk. She just floats.
Yeah,
There's literally pictures of us right here because she's just the coolest. And seeing her in this was the coolest. And hearing her even laugh about how the Queen was washing her feet because Claire Foy had to bathe Sheila's feet was just so cool to hear about and all of that. So I just love this film, and I feel although my connection is 80 times removed, I feel very connected to it. So
yeah, it's so nice for us to be one of the main characters in the ensemble is actually a friend of ours.
Yeah. Well, and then another one is friends with my brother, which is also there's just so many connections.
Yeah, there's so many weird connections. We're based in Toronto. We probably live 4 blocks away from Sarah Polley, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know where she lives, but I don't know. Probably very
close.
to us. So I don't know. We could be walking one day and run into her. Totally, that could happen. But yeah, I mean, we both love this movie. And Dylan, what do you think about this film?
Well, I have no personal bias because I sadly don't know Sheila McCarthy, so I don't get to hear stories of Ruth and Cheryl. But I have asked Judith Ivey 2 questions and have a picture with her, so maybe that's my bias. But bias aside, I love this movie, and I loved it even more in a rewatch. The first time I watched it, I gave it a very strong 8. It was something I really loved, but I did see it at a festival, so maybe my thoughts got a little mixed because there were so many other movies I saw. The main one I took away was Close and EO. But now rewatching Women Talking months later, I'm yeah, this is great. I think I even messaged Matt after walking out of my screening, and it was okay, this was in my top 20. This is now in my top 10. So it made a huge jump up in my list, and I'm just very happy I finally got a chance to re-see it because MGM, what are you doing? At least, I get if you put this wide, it's going to bomb, but at least put it somewhere where, I had to drive an hour to even go to a theater that was showing it. I was already going in that area anyway, but, that's how far I had to go just to see it. And I live in the capital of my state too, so it's kind of weird that like the capital of Virginia wouldn't be showing women talking anywhere, but if you had to drive an hour to like where the film festival was, they're showing it.
The script is obviously a major highlight here. There are many highlights in this movie, but the script is a big one. The writing is just so incredible, and I actually heard firsthand from Sarah Polley. I'm going to brag about that this whole time. That she went as far as she wrote multiple drafts of the script from the perspective of every single character. So she wrote this draft. Every single character had a pass where they would narrate the story, where the story would be told from their perspective, and they'd be the main character. I think that's just absolutely incredible, and it shows in the process. But Dylan, what about the script is so special for you?
I mean, we get like 10, 15 characters, and I feel like I know so much about every character, no matter how much their screen time is. Like, Frances McDormand, who plays Scarface, maybe has 5 minutes of screen time. I fully understand her character, where she came from, what her goals are. And then on the complete opposite side, someone like Ona, who's on screen, who's technically the lead of this movie, even though there is no lead. I fully get her motives and her future and her past. So, like, I'll talk more about it later when we talk about some other stuff with the film. But to me, this is the definition of what a best award-winning script should be. It's concise, it's assertive, it knows what it wants to talk about and delivers in a way that is not overtly preachy but still get its point across, and it's so emotionally resonative for, I feel like anyone could watch this movie regardless of your past, your background. You'll be able to latch onto at least one character and feel their emotion as you go on this, which I should mention, very short journey. It's only like an hour 40. You get in and out pretty quickly, which also I think is a testament to how much this script packs into such a short runtime.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the script, Sierra?
Well, I listened to the script, which was the film. I did not read it, but just based on exactly what, Dylan, you were saying, like, it gets everything across. No word is wasted. She didn't add something that was just there for decoration. Every single thing that is said has a purpose, and everything that obviously is shown and has a purpose. It's just brilliant. Like, it's perfectly concise. I can't even think of a single scene that could be removed that would keep the movie consistent. Whereas I feel like so often with other movies, you do get that. And I like that we literally got the director's cut as the final movie, which is kind of neat. Because sometimes they're like 8 hours long.
Yeah, and it just moves at such a brisk pace, and it's just so economic. Okay, I think the thing for me that makes the script really special, so I feel like a lot of the reason why a lot of people haven't gone to see this movie is because they hear the premise of it and they go, oh, God. Oh, God, this sounds so... Not even just the title. I mean, I'll get into that a little bit later, but when you hear the stories about a bunch of women who have been abused serially for months, and they're talking about what they need to do, when you hear that premise, you go, oh, God, this is going to be so depressing. Right? Like, that's your first thought. And I feel like a lot of people avoid that type of movie, the type of movie that just feels like it lingers in the trauma. But the thing that I think is so special about Sarah Polley's script here is that it doesn't linger in the trauma. This is a fable. This is not a story about a bunch of women talking about the horrible things that happened to them. This is a story about a bunch of women who have an opportunity to change the world, to reimagine what their life could be. And so I feel like Sarah Polley approaches this idea not with sadness, not with depression, not with trauma. She approaches it with lightness. So instead of talking about specific performances or actors, I want to talk about moments that stand out to you guys. Because I know for me, if I'm thinking of a moment that stood out to me, I come back to 2 moments. And one of them is there's a moment where Sheila McCarthy, she takes her false teeth out of her mouth, and she begins to cry, and she says, forgive me. They are too large for my mouth. And that moment feels like the first moment that character shows vulnerability, because through the rest of it, she's a beacon of positivity. She's saying, let's talk about my horses, Ruth and Cheryl. You know, when everyone else is sad, she's the one that needs to be the adult in the room and show that she is strong. That's the first moment, though, when we see that maybe she's in more pain than she's letting on. I think that's a beautiful moment. The other moment that I'd say would be when they ask what should they do if they stay, and Rooney Mara says, well, we could just kill all the men. And everyone's like, oh my God. And then Rooney Mara's serious expression goes into a smile, and she just like, that moment is just so lovely and captivating and so perfect for her character. So that's what I'll leave it with. But Dylan, were there any moments of acting in particular that really stuck with you?
I mean, to me, on this watch, it would have to be with Rooney Mara's character Ona as well. When she's having the discussion with Marike, played by Jessie Buckley, and they're going back and forth about forgiveness and how it can't be forced. Like, yeah, we could stay, we could fight, but eventually we're going to have to forgive if we stay. And if you're forcing yourself to forgive, is that really real? And I just love the dynamic between both characters because they're both on a visual level, they're on polar opposites, but on an emotional level, they agree. They just, with their angle they want to go, they can't really verbally agree. So that would be one. But I know we weren't mentioning favorites, but if I had to give like a standout or anything, because it's a moment that kind of lingers throughout the whole movie, but it would be Kate Hallett's character who plays like the narrator per se. Mm-hmm. I felt like every time when she went into narration was a highlight throughout the story, just the way that she was able to I'm not sure the right terminology to use, but just her tone of voice to carry the story throughout, like where you didn't feel like you were being swayed in any direction. She was just saying like, hey, to her future, I don't think sibling, but friend. But I mean, everyone in this is kind of like family. Yeah. So just saying
she's
like,
speaking
hey,
to Ona's child.
Yes, a child, and just like talking just about what went down. I just felt like all of those moments of narration add so much emotional punch that really helps keep the story afloat throughout. Because if not, it would be kind of like you were mentioning before, just a collection of stories or individual moments, but those moments are the ones that connect them all together to get to the eventual conclusion point.
No, you're right. That brings the whole movie together, and she's just the perfect choice for the narrator. And I know that Sarah Polley would have written every single draft. She would have had a different narrator, and I think she picked the perfect one. I really do.
Me too.
But Sierra, do you have any moments that really stuck out to you?
I mean, the whole movie is just, it's just like I could think of so many standout moments. But I mean, to stick to my true Sheila fandom, I remembered.
We love Sheila.
I love Sheila, but I remembered one as you were talking about her character's lightness and airiness of the moment, which I don't think I really fully understood the first time that I watched this, but the second time when she puts her glasses on and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I think I'm dying." It's just so funny.
Oh,
like just
I
the way
love
she
that
delivered
moment.
it was so like, and everyone looks at her like, "Are you joking? Like I don't understand."
No, your glasses are just fogged up.
It's just such a wonderful, like, genuine moment. And it almost seems like Sheila just said that, like, off the top of her head. And even if it wasn't someone that I knew personally, like, the delivery is just so honest.
So we've heard for months now people discussing the color grade. I've seen a lot of people online just not liking it whatsoever. I personally am a huge fan of the color grade. I love the look of this movie. It's one of my favorite looking films of the year because it's so distinct and unique. But Dylan, after all this time, how do you feel about the color grade?
I mean, I still feel the same on this viewing. Like you've mentioned before, you got to interview Sarah Polley. She gave her reasons for the color grade, and I fully agree with them, and I think they really elevate the film's emotional punch. I understand why people aren't on board with it. However, like outside of that artistic choice of the color grade, I just feel like Polley's direction on this film is one of the year's best, and I was just really sad to see over the course of award season that one decision really limit her chances to be nominated, not just for cinematography, but for direction at various awards bodies.
Yeah, that kills me because I really think that she would have been in the best director lineup without that. But I think people have this preconceived notion, even just seeing stills. It's just, oh God, it's such a great directing decision, like you said, but it has limited her. It kind of breaks my heart. I've also seen a lot of people say that this film is a bit too stagey, which I disagree with. I think that this film feels really cinematic. It feels huge, even down to like the aspect ratio feeling like an old epic or like a Western. I think it's a great artistic choice, and it makes the film feel so much bigger than just a bunch of women in an attic talking. It is women talking, but it's more than that. And she also uses a lot of flashbacks and a lot of things to take us out of that environment. Like, if I were to put this beside something like The Whale, this is so much more cinematic than that. But I just want to hear, like, what do you think about the complaint that it's too stagey?
There's a reason that films are adapted into stage plays, and stage plays are adapted into, I was going both ways. But there's a reason that happens because they're both art. And I don't if someone says something was too theatrical, meaning movie theatrical, versus too stagey, like, I don't really see it as a negative, but at the same time, I agree, it's not too stagey. There's so much happening, and even when we were talking to Sheila about this and saying like, oh, could it be developed into a stage play? And we were really I really started to think about it, and I realized it would be really hard because it isn't a stage play. It's a movie for a reason, and I think honestly the title of the movie is probably what makes people think that it's more stage play-y than it is theatrical. I mean, I can think of so many movies that have men doing the same thing or mixed gender doing the same thing, and because it is specifically about, in this case, a woman's issue or female identifying issues, I feel like that makes people think it's too talky or it's too stagey.
Yeah.
But I mean,
no one seems to raise that issue with 12 Angry Men.
No, especially because they're angry. But I feel like they get so much done, and women get things done when they talk, whereas men have to fight about it. I'm not stereotyping.
It's all quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah, exactly. But
fighting.
They get things done in this movie, and I think the beauty of that movie, which we're not talking about that movie, but is just how war gets nothing accomplished. But these women talking, they get a lot accomplished. And I'm not trying to gender anything, but I do feel like it's named Woman Talking for a reason, but it's also given the feedback that it's gotten because of that, which I think is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, sure, it does feel like a stage play, but that's not a negative. Like, I think you can go back to last year and say Drive My Car feels like it could be a stage play, but also that's not a negative about it. Like, movies, just because they are like a insane setting, like using Mass as another example from last year, like, yeah, sure, you can make it a stage play, but also the fact that it's set to film, there's a lot of, like, cinematic choices, as we've discussed before, what elevates it outside of it just being a film stage version. Because like you can pick like a lot of different movies that are adapted from the stage, like Matt mentioned before, The Whale. There's not a lot of cinematic choices there made to make it feel like, oh, this is just different from recording a play, where on the other hand, Women Talking is not taken from the stage. But like, let's say it was, I think there's enough cinematic choices made, whether that is the color grade, the camera movements, the sound work, that makes it feel like not just a recorded stage version.
Now, this film only ended up getting 2 Oscar nominations, which I think is a motherfucking crime against humanity that this film only has 2 nominations. So first off, why do we think that this film underperformed like this? And second, what other nominations would we give it?
I mean, I agree, it is a crime, but also to look at the Oscar side, it's kind of hard to find room because no one can agree on one of the actresses because they're all so good. So right there, you limit yourself 1 or 2 nominations. Just nominating Ben Whishaw would feel weird, so that's another one that's out. The color grading kind of limited the cinematography and direction choice, so then that just leaves picture, screenplay, which I got, and then it missed out on editing and score, which, I mean, personally, I would throw it in there in score, and editing it should be in the competition. But, like, looking at it on, like, a grand scheme, I understand why it only ended up with 2, even though I think at minimum it should have been 3. Like, personally, yeah, like, give this 5, 6, 7 type nominations.
I think, and I mean, I love watching the Oscars. I love watching awards season. It's so fun to really dive into, not on your level, but just to watch. But I do think that the Oscars, there's a formula for a reason. Like you both can predict what's going to get what, because it is like a math equation at this point. If you make this and you do this and you add this, it kind of guarantees you can be in all of these categories. And I like that Sarah Polley didn't just go for the formula, because she could have honestly made this film to be like the perfect Oscar baby and have gotten all the nominations. But because the way that the Oscars and so many other award shows are formed, certain things get certain things, and when you make a film that is out of that, it's really hard to get people to wrap their brains around, like, oh, I can do that, I can nominate that, because so often it is so formulaic. And I mean, again, it's called Women Talking. A lot of the Academy is male. Yeah. Did they even see this movie, which is a crime in itself?
I mean, I've got to agree with you on this, just in the sense of, like, I think it's so disappointing to see how so many men who are in the film industry will refuse to watch movies like this. It's the same issue that happened with Till, where there was a lot of white voters who were like, I don't want to watch that. Like, we saw that over and over and over. And I think that the same thing happens with men in a movie like this, where people will go, that's a movie for women. I don't want to watch that. Or you'll
hear the argument of, like, I've seen that so much, though.
Yeah.
It's
but
like...
I was talking to a friend who works in the film industry, and she was telling me she was talking to a male colleague who said that he refused to watch women talking because he felt like the title was talking down to him.
I mean, SNL made it a similar joke.
But, like, it's so disappointing to me that the reason why this only got 2 nominations is because the people that watch it love it. But there's a lot of people that refuse to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredibly disappointing. And, you know, if this doesn't win adapted screenplay, I mean, for one thing, we need to start a riot if it doesn't win adapted screenplay. But I think that just shows that the male voting bloc of the Academy literally refused to watch the movie. And that's why those votes went to All Quiet or Top Gun or whoever else would win.
Oscars so male identifying.
Yeah, hashtag Oscars so male. Hashtag not my adapted screenplay winner. Screenplay?
It comes out to WGA. If this loses, because WGA does like comedies, and Glass Onion's there. They did Borat. If it loses WGA, All Quiet wins the Oscar. But, as we've mentioned, this should win. So putting predictions aside, like, regardless of your thoughts on the visuals of this movie, I feel like you have to admit the script is, like, perfect, as we've mentioned throughout. Like, I adore how it's, like, layered and it's impactful. And, like, in such a short runtime, as I mentioned before, so many characters and topics you get to fully invest in, and you learn about this world that you may originally think is far off and distant, but it's only, like, 10 years ago. And stuff like this probably is still happening today. Like this, as in, like, the community. Obviously, what's happening is still occurring, sadly, and it sucks that stuff like that has to happen. But I feel like, to Matt's point, like, the people who are resistant to wanting to watch this are probably the people who this movie's really trying to speak to, and it's just really sad that the people who is, like, the target audience of, like, hey, these are lessons to learn, are the people who are like, I don't even care, I'm never gonna, like, indulge. And like I mentioned before, the shortest Best Picture nominee, there's stuff that's 2.5 hours, 3 hours. This is 1:45 if you take out the credits. It's not that long.
Yeah, when we get those anonymous Oscar ballots, which are going to be coming in the next couple of weeks, I guarantee we're going to see a lot of people say, I didn't even watch women talking. Mm-hmm. And that is going to break my heart. That's going to break my heart.
They'll watch all that MCU gives out, which I love MCU, but it's an hour and 44
really going to break my heart to see, because I just know that there's going to be a lot of men in the Academy who are like, I decided not to watch that one.
Yeah, didn't feel it was for me.
So, but let's hope, fingers crossed, that it wins WGA and it wins the Oscar. That's all I can hope for. Anything else to wrap this up with, guys?
That's all I got. Just go see this movie if it comes out near you.
But as always, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Please go and watch this movie. And as always, my name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and this is Fantasy Filmball.